There are 100 priests of an unspecified religion. They have arrived dressed in the symbols of their faith in a new land to spread the word of their superbook. This could be any land: France, Egypt, feudal Japan, the Toronto Film Festival, any land. Absolutely any land you can imagine. Gondor, Pangaea, 1992, or your own home and surrounding lands, which are unique to you. Upon arriving in this strange new land, they learn that the people here have no knowledge of Superbook. They decide that the best way to spread the word is to construct a building as a symbol of the new faith. So they purchase some basic tools and set to work gathering wood for their shrine. As there were 100 priests in their prime, the shrine was constructed in under a week. It was a basic thing. It's the sort of shrine you would look at and say, that's pretty shit. Did children build this? You didn't tell me there were feral children around? A central trunk with a roughly carved deity symbol nailed to the top stood in a forest clearing. A few rows of log seats encircled it, and around the edges stood a few tall torches burning incense. The priests stood back and looked proud over their creation, happy that they could begin spreading the words and illustrations of Superbook. It was suggested by one of the priests that, hey, we should go for a drink to celebrate our success, to which exactly half of the priests thought would be a good idea. So 50 of the priests headed down to the local pub where they spent the night drinking whatever beverages Superbook allowed. Upon returning from their celebrations, the priests were greeted by a horrifying sight. Have I got beverage in my eyes? One of the priests was heard to say, or has something destroyed our shrine? The priest was correct. Before them lay the ruins of their primitive shrine. A tangle of wood and limbs all set ablaze by the incense torches. How exactly all 50 priests who remained at the shrine managed to perish as the single tall, thin structure collapsed remains a mystery to this day. As the priests stood in shock, staring and mourning over their lost friends, one of them turned to notice something that looked out of place. As he squinted, he could make out on the horizon a figure all in black, speeding away on an unspecified vehicle. It could be a motorbike, a sports car, a horse and carriage, a horse without a carriage. Absolutely any vehicle you can think of: a bicycle, a unicycle, a pangolin, or a petrol-powered pangolin. But it was too late. The man disappeared over the horizon. As the remaining priests gathered their thoughts, one of them suggested that they should not be discouraged, and that their fallen friends would want them to rebuild the shrine in memory of them. The priests agreed and set about building a new shrine, bigger and better than the first, to remember this tragic day. They quarried stones, they cut down trees, and they sewed curtains. Nice curtains. I mean, really nice curtains, with tassels and everything. It took the 50 priests a few weeks to complete, but eventually they were able to stand back and admire their new creation. It was a quaint chapel on the hill, the sort of chapel you would look at and say, hey, look at that quaint little chapel, and oh damn, check out those nice curtains. A trodden dirt path led to the entrance of a small stone structure. Inside was the picture of simplicity and modesty. A few rows of pews on a polished wooden floor, and an altar stood in front of a patchwork deity symbol. As the priests admired their new chapel, they remarked that, yes, their fallen friends would be happy with this. One of the priests suggested that they visit a local theme park to celebrate this day. Exactly half of the priests agreed. They spent the day riding deity-approved rides, gambling deity-approved amounts of money, and not riding deity condemned rides. Upon returning from their celebrations, the priests were greeted by a horrifying sight. Have I got deity-approved theme park snacks in my eyes? One of the priests was heard to say, or has something destroyed our chapel? The priest was correct. On the hill lay a pile of stone rubble, limbs, and silky smooth curtain, tassels ... which was all on fire for some reason. As the priests stood staring in horror over their lost friends, one of them turned to notice something that, yes, upon the horizon he could just make out the man in black speeding into the distance. But it was too late. He was gone. As the remaining priests took care of the dead in the way decreed by Superbook, one of them suggested that this should not be the end. and that their fallen friends would want them to rebuild the chapel in memory of them. The priests agreed and set about pillaging neighboring villages for building supplies. They gathered glass, mixed cement, smelted iron, mined for gold, and expanded their quarry. They didn't just rebuild the chapel, they built a fully fledged church. It's a sort of church that, when you refer to it like, oh, it's up by the church, people would know what you are talking about and benefit from your informative directions. It had taken the 25 priests 6 months of labor, but there it stood. A paved path led through an iron fence, protection against and would-be church destroyers, and towards an imposing stone structure. Stained glass windows adorned the front, complete with deity symbols. The pews could seat 1,000, and a golden forged superbook sat upon the altar. The 25 priests patted themselves on the back and said a prayer for the lost friends. One priest suggested that after 6 months, they deserved a celebratory meal to mark the occasion. 12 priests agreed, whilst the rest stayed to rest, content in the safety of their shiny new iron fence. The 12 priests spent the evening at a nearby Italian restaurant because everyone is allowed to eat Italian food. After an evening of scoffing increasingly abstract pasta shapes, the 12 priests returned to their church. One of the priests was heard to say, "Have I got tagliatelle in my eye? Or has someone knocked down our church again?" The scene that greeted them was one of sorrow and anger. Sorrow for their dead friends, crushed under heaps of stone and glass. Anger at their dead friends for placing so much faith in an iron fence. Yet more anger at the figure they could see vanishing over the horizon. At this point, you are probably thinking that these priests are idiots, that surely they can understand the pattern by now, that building a church plus staying in the church equals death. You would also think that after the previous events, they would not believe that the solution would be to build a bigger church, ... as this in no way addresses the problem at hand. You may think that surely he could just keep rambling on like this, and that he will wrap this up soon. After all, we have figured out the pattern of the joke, and we know where it is going anyway. So one of the priests, suffering from long-term memory loss, suggested that to honor their friends, they should build a new monument to their faith. The others, after giving him concerned looks, figured they had come this far and, resigned to their fate, they agreed. The priests then spent the next 5 years ravaging the lands for resources. They felled forests, flattened hills, and drove the critically endangered Penipus to extinction to use their tears for cement after a further 5 years of construction. They were finally able to stand back, crane their necks high, and admire their creation. This was a truly great achievement. This was now a cathedral, the sort of cathedral that architecture students congregate around. The sort of structure that everyone for miles around would refer to as that massive F********azig aging monstrosity made of tears. And there would be weird rumors like at night I've heard that you can hear the pentopuses crying from inside the walls. Whether these rumors were true or not, it was an impressive building, the size of an aeroplane hangar. It had an attached aeroplane hangar. It was the first cathedral built with a solid steel support structure, and for added protection, a moat and barbed wire fence surrounded it. The priests had been at the whole building monuments for the superbook for many years now, and were getting old and tired. One of them suggested that they should take a trip to a local spa for a day of relaxation after this great achievement. After all, ... He said page 69 of Superbook does proclaim in giant text, "Thou shalt spa." 5 other priests, who probably had better survival instincts, agreed, and the 6 of them took off. 6 remained content in their reinforced structure, even taking shifts to keep watch for added security. The 6 who left spent the day wallowing in mud, having cucumbers placed on various body parts, and being generally as unenergetic as possible. They were also pleasantly surprised to find that their local infamy granted them free access to all the spa's facilities. After they had left in their own time and the spa owner barred the doors shut behind them, they headed back to their church. "Have I still got cucumber in my eye?" one of the 6 said as their home loomed on the horizon. "Or has someone destroyed our church?" The priest was correct. As they approached and crossed the moat, they found a towering pile of rubble. There was an eerie silence as they glared at the destruction, picturing their dead friends somewhere inside. The silence was only broken by the sound of the man in black speeding off over the horizon and the joyous cries of Penopus souls being freed. The sight of the man in black filled one of the priests with rage. He turned to the others and said, "Hey, I know what we need to do." The others agreed before he had chance to say what it was. The priests set about gathering more resources. After the 10 years it took them to gather this, they were surrounded by a scorched, barren earth. They had felled all the trees for 20 miles, flattened the earth, hunted all life to extinction. All life. Even worms. They took all the worms and used them to lure down all the birds. Then they trained the birds to help lift heavy objects for them. Then they ate the birds. Then they made a monument to remember the birds. Then they didn't really put much effort into maintaining it, and it ran into disrepair. The end. Drained lakes and sucked clouds from the sky somehow. It took a further 10 years for the small group of aging priests to complete their construction. For the sake of this story, 4 of the priests died during a slave bird rebellion that was later crushed. Mainly because I think of many more advancing stages of church besides going into ghost churches or space churches. Though those would be awesome, their creation could barely be called a church. Yes, it was built in the shape of their deity symbol, and inside were super mahogany, pews, and a diamond pulpit, but to all other purposes, this was a fortress. The entire structure was titanium, standing 30 stories high. It was surrounded with laser fences, laser moats full of lasers, and atop the building were placed a cluster of guns which shot bullets which were also made of lasers. There were immense speaker systems built into the walls, which issued threats as well as religious goodwill messages to all who approached. It was the sort of church that you wouldn't say anything about, because the church would know what you said and rain lasers upon you. The doom of the man in black was built, but they needed bait. The 2 old priests drew straws to decide who would stay. The priest who left made it known that he would be leaving for a day on the beach. He spent his day pretending to sunbathe, pretending to build sandcastles, and pretending to dip his toes in the water until he heard a commotion in the distance. He raced back towards his fortress with a smile on his face. The sort of smile you would have if the person who has killed 98 of your closest 99 friends had been killed. When he could peer over the next horizon, however, his smile vanished. All he could see in front of him was a smoking heap of titanium and misfiring lasers. As he peered through the smoke, he could make out the man in black making his escape. Something inside him had told him that this would happen, and this time he was prepared. He knew there was no sand in his eyes. He'd only been pretending to touch the sand. He ran behind a nearby bush and hopped aboard his super priest scooter and gave chase. No, through the desolate lands he chased the man, gaining ever so slowly until after hours. To the priest's surprise, the man had pulled over. The priest pulled up and approached the man, his face red with rage. "Have you been knocking down our churches?" The priest roared, and the man replied, "No. ...